Hey, gorgeous people, how are you today? So, today I'm diving into what's happened with this Epstein file release because I'm genuinely disturbed by it. I feel really unsettled about the state of humanity, and I really wanted to ask the question, are these people evil? Are they genuinely evil, or is there something psychological going on with the global elite that's causing these sorts of continuing issues with abuse and murder and torture and all these horrific things? So I wanted to dive in really and talk about why the powerful get away with this kind of abuse and how we might actually stop it from a psychological point of view and as a culture, as a society, as a collection of human beings. How do we stop this? So when stories about extreme abuse by powerful people surface, the most disturbing question isn't what happened, even though that is horrifyingly disturbing. It's how this kind of harm can exist for decades across countries, institutions, and governments without being stopped. So this isn't the first time. We've had the Jimmy Savile thing in the UK and all of those institutions that covered it up. We've got the stuff in Ireland with the Catholic Church and that continued abuse over decades. So people often respond in two ways. Some turn away because it's too overwhelming. Others fall into rage or conspiracy because they feel there must be some hidden, inhuman explanation, like these people are just simply evil. But today I want to offer something slightly different. So it isn't about gossip, names, or shock. The crucial thing is that it's about power and how that changes human behaviour and how systems protect it and why abuse becomes possible when accountability disappears. And most importantly, this is about what actually works to stop this kind of harm, what we can do. I'm going to post loads of links to really great organisations that are trying to fight this kind of perversion in society, because this isn't inevitable, that we don't have to put up with this forever. This isn't just one in a long line of abuses that's going to continue. We can do something about it. This is a solvable issue, so hopefully we never see anything as disturbing and horrific again. So one of the most important things to understand is that extreme sexual abuse, especially against children, is not driven primarily by desire. So decades of psychological research show that this kind of violence is primarily about domination. So it's about control, it's about humiliation, it's about testing boundaries, and it's about proving absolute power over another human being. And children are targeted not because they're desirable, but because they are maximally vulnerable. These are the most vulnerable people in society. So when someone can harm the most powerless person imaginable and face absolutely no consequences for it, it enrages me that nothing's happening. And I know everybody feels the same way. Why aren't these people being arrested? We can see it with our own eyes, all of the evidence that suggests these people need to be in jail, but nothing's happening. And that produces this terrifying psychological confirmation that these people are untouchable. So what it boils down to is that power doesn't just give people opportunities, loads of money, a yacht and a private jet. It changes fundamentally how their brains work and how they think. So studies consistently show that as power increases, empathy decreases, impulsivity increases, moral boundaries weaken, and other people are perceived as more tools than subjects. They're dehumanized. Power doesn't automatically turn people into abusers, but it removes the friction that stops dangerous people from acting on these weird and perverse impulses. And crucially, systems of extreme wealth and influence don't just tolerate narcissism, psychopathy, or moral flexibility. They often reward these traits. So it is those people that lack morals, that can be harsh, that can be brutal in terms of their business decisions, that become the rich and powerful. So what we're seeing isn't just random corruption, it's natural selection. It's what Darwin was talking about. These people are selected for to become rich billionaires with ultimate power that gives them freedom to act in whatever perverse ways they want. So no one commits repeated acts of cruelty while they fully recognise the humanity of their victims. So dehumanisation, it isn't accidental. It's a psychological mechanism that allows harm to continue without internal psychological collapse. So the victims become objects. They're no longer human. They're commodities. They're not like us. They're different. Or their lives simply don't matter in their kind of psychological landscape. And this is how someone can love their own children, donate to charities, be admired publicly, and still commit these acts, these polarized acts of complete and utter violence. So human empathy is selective, and power determines who's allowed to count. So abuse at this kind of scale, it never happens in isolation. These are part of massive networks of disgusting perverts. And it happens in environments where this kind of secrecy is normal, silence is rewarded, and exposure is punished. When wrongdoing is shared, it creates this kind of mutual guilt, this shared sense of protecting the group. And sometimes it involves mutual blackmail, something that is quite evident in these Epstein files. So over time, moral boundaries shift. What would horrify outsiders becomes normal, something private, or simply just how things work. So it's this kind of group mentality that upholds these kind of systems and rules. And it doesn't require a cult. They're not necessarily devil-worshipping cult members. It does, though, psychologically function in the same way. So secrecy, loyalty, and fear, they replace conscience. When victims come forward, institutions very rarely ask, "What happened to you? Are you all right?" Instead, they ask how disruptive it might be if all of this is true. And I think that's what prevented the issues of Jimmy Savile coming out earlier. How disruptive is this going to be to the BBC and everybody that worked alongside him that covered it up? So every society has a hierarchy of credibility. Children, women, the poor, migrants, and every marginalised group, they all sit at the bottom. And the powerful, those people with all the money, the elites that are doing all these horrible things, they sit at the top. So disbelief isn't always ignorance, it's often a strategic decision. Protecting reputations, funding, stability, it's treated as more than protecting human beings, which disgusts me. It makes me ashamed of humanity that we protect ourselves above the really vulnerable people that need our protection. And it's not a failure of knowledge, it's a failure of moral priorities, putting money and stability and not rocking the boat ahead of protecting the most vulnerable people in society. So why does this keep happening? It keeps happening ultimately because we treat abuse as an individual moral failure. It's about Epstein, it's about Jimmy Savile, it's about Catholic bishops, priests. It isn't about those individuals necessarily. It's about a structural failure. So we're looking for these monsters when we should be dismantling the conditions that allow these horrible, horrific monsters to operate safely. So abuse thrives where there is secrecy, concentrated power, and no meaningful accountability or transparency. So this is probably the most important part. If we want this to stop, we need to stop asking how to make powerful people good and start asking how to make abuse impossible to hide. That's the key. So make it so that it's impossible for them to do these things. So we've got to end secrecy as a default in society. Abuse collapses under transparency, and that means there's no sealed settlements for abuse. We can't have these sealed documents in court that don't expose the perpetrator. We can't have no non-disclosure agreements protecting these perpetrators. We should have public accountability as the norm and not the exception. So ultimately, this secrecy is what's protecting them, and it's transparency that disrupts these things. Abuse declines sharply when consequences are swift, visible, and unavoidable. We need to do something right now. Everybody on a global level needs to be absolutely making themselves heard that we want transparency, we want justice. And it requires ultimately independent prosecutors, no private arbitration for serious crimes, and no institutions policing themselves, which is happening at the minute over in the US. This shouldn't be allowed. They shouldn't be policing themselves. They shouldn't be holding these documents and keeping things hidden. It shouldn't happen. We need to fight for change. Justice can't be optional for the powerful. They have to be seen to pay for these awful crimes that they've. The fastest way to stop abuse is to make speaking out safer than staying silent, and that means legal immunity for whistleblowers, financial and psychological support for victims. This should all be the norm. And cultural legitimacy, not suspicion of these people that are speaking out, but making this part of our fabric and culture that we support people that are speaking out. Silence should be the risky option, not the truth. Concentrated power is always a risk factor for violence, and this is what I've been saying in every single one of my videos, that we need to make society more equal. So it's this unchecked wealth, unchecked institutions, unchecked authority, all of those things, and this vast inequality that is always producing harm. So democratic systems decay when power stops fearing exposure. We're losing ultimately more than just the opportunity to bring these people to justice, but we're losing the very fabric of our democracy by not doing anything about it. This is cultural as much as legal, but when we treat wealth, status, or intelligence as evidence of moral superiority, we create cover for abuse. So we're doing this. We're creating the cover for these horrible people by worshipping people like Elon Musk, because he's a billionaire and he's quite smart. We've done it before with all of the famous, intelligent people. We worship and praise the royal family. All of these people are simply people, and we've got to understand that respect should be earned through accountability and acts, not just through them being particularly successful, wealthy, or born into status. So when systems protect abusers, people lose faith in justice, in democracy, in truth itself. Like I am losing faith in the systems that are there to protect us, because everybody in these powerful positions are perpetrating these horrific crimes. They're part of these networks. So who do we trust anymore? It's difficult to know. And can we trust the systems that are upholding our democracy? So that loss doesn't stay quiet. It turns into this kind of rage, despair and extremism. And we're at real risk of that now when we lose faith in these institutions. So this accountability isn't just about the victims, although we really should remember that these people do exist and they suffered the most horrific trauma, torture, rape and abuse. But it is about more than that as well. It's about preventing the moral collapse of our society. If we don't trust them, then society collapses. We need to get that back, and we need to ask our MPs and the people and TDs and the people that are responsible for upholding these norms to commit to changes in legislation and the way that they behave, to make everything a little bit more transparent, so that we can gain a little bit of trust back in the people that are protecting us. So finally then, understanding these mechanisms, it isn't about despair, although I think I'm not going to be alone in feeling a little bit in a state of despair and completely unsettled with the way things are at the minute. But it's about refusing to be naive about power. Abuse survives on silence, hierarchy and disbelief, and it ends with transparency, accountability, and courage becomes non-negotiable in this. We've got to be brave. We've got to stand up and say that we want politicians that are straight speaking, transparent, and not corrupt. We've got to be really strong as a society to fight against this, to prevent it happening again. So ultimately, it's not inevitable. We don't have to see this continuing, these horrible abuses of power. And it doesn't require perfect people. It just requires changes to the systems that refuse to protect harm. We need to change our entire way of looking at these things and fight for transparency and inequality ultimately, and the massive wealth and influence that people have in society, and make it more balanced and open and free. Okay, that's it for now. So like I said, I'm going to post in the comments loads of groups and organisations that you can look into, and also I suggest that we as a society, as a collaborative, we really sort of lobby our local parliamentary representatives to be part of this change, where we can avoid this sort of thing ever happening again. I'll see you soon, guys. Bye.